This verbal cast distinction by now should be antique.
Today, I'd like to introduce my own particular approach to making the traditional Korean side dish, kimchi, which I make here in East Africa using local ingredients. Kimchi's primary ingredient is NAPA cabbage. When choosing it, make sure that the stem is clear, as this indicates freshness. First, you'll want to cut it into halves, and then again into quarters. From there, you can chop it up into smaller pieces based on your own personal preference. Next, immerse the cabbage in a sea salt bath, in which I tend to like to let it sit for about 10 hours. Often that means overnight if I make it in the evening. Now, the salt is not there for flavor so much as it is for fermentation and also to keep unwanted bacteria from propagating. So later, we will rinse away this salt. I grow most of my kimchi ingredients right out back in my very own little vegetable patch, which we call shamba here in Kenya, and where the climate is ideal for growing our next essential ingredient, Chinese radish, also known widely by its Japanese name, daikon. Incidentally, the leaves are edible and taste quite similar to arugula. The next step is to make what's called the porridge. Begin with 2 cups of water, which you'll want to bring to a simmer. Add to this about a half a cup of hot pepper flakes, depending on your own personal taste. To this I add about a cup of fish sauce and about 3 or 4 tablespoons of BAOBAB flour. Normally, the ingredient would be rice flour, but I like to substitute that with locally found BAOBAB flour. Add to this about 3 or 4 tablespoons of sugar. Today I happen to be using brown sugar, but white is also perfectly acceptable. Now proceed to chop up 1 medium-sized onion, 6 cloves of garlic, and 2 tablespoons of ginger. Often I'll also add a pinch of turmeric. Stir frequently until porridge consistency is achieved. Incidentally, I'd like to make it quite clear that I have no objection to modern food processors, which make the task of food prep much easier and more efficient. I use them myself daily. However, for this presentation, I prefer to demonstrate in the most basic way. So please, if it suits you, by all means, go ahead and use a blender. Now that the salt has been thoroughly rinsed and the cabbage leaves dried, add the porridge mixture and massage it into each individual cabbage leaf. This critical process may take around 15 to 20 minutes. Next, chop up the carrots, spring onion, Chinese radish, also known as daikon. Add and resume mixing and massaging for another 5 to 10 minutes until thoroughly and consistently blended. I bought this lovely little pot in an Ethiopian market, and my wife found this one here in Kenya. To a certain extent, they are not completely dissimilar to the Korean earthenware known as ongi. For convenience, however, I tend to store my kimchi in pickling jars that I then keep in a consistently cool, dark place, which in my case tends to be the floor of my pantry. For today's demonstration, however, I am for the first time going to attempt to follow the traditional Korean method of storing in an earthen jar, albeit Ethiopian, which I will bury in my garden for about 2 weeks. Simultaneously, I'll also fill a pickling jar for comparison. The purpose for burying the jars is to maintain a constantly cool temperature, optimal for fermentation. Nowadays, of course, most people have access to refrigeration, and burying, therefore, is no longer necessary. However, simply out of interest in traditional procedure, my own curiosity, and for purposes of this demonstration, I figure, hey, let's give it a try. I'm now covering the jar with banana leaves in order to prevent rain or soil from seeping in. Of course, one could also use cellophane, but that wouldn't be quite as much fun. Okay, so now it's the big day. I've prepared rice, tofu, noodles, soups, all sorts of dishes, so we can try to enjoy my kimchi in a traditional Korean meal of bulgogi. Again, I'm using my Ethiopian pots for the meal, and this Ethiopian jiko, as we call it, as stove, is very, very excellent for making bulgogi. Kimchi. Oh, it's gonna be so. And now for the moment of truth. Will my kimchi meet the highest of culinary standards? Meet the judges, my wife Jacinta and our son Muvasu.
This is really good.
Not bad, not bad.